morning, Nell. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Tell us, how did you think about writing The Color of the Milk?
Ideas are quite complicated where they come from. It's quite difficult to trace where they come from. Once you've had an idea, it seems so simple and obvious, but obviously things have gone into your mind and lots of different elements have gone in, and there's a sort of strange mixture. So one of the things is I've been working with marginalised people who have no voice in society for about 10 years, doing workshops and encouraging people to have their own voice and to learn to write and to speak and express themselves. And I worked with a family of women who were illiterate, the mother and 3 daughters, none of whom could read or write. And I saw the sort of devastating effects of being in a illiterate society and not having access to that information. That was one of the things, and that sort of I thought about a lot. I write plays as well, and I was working on a project with the Royal Shakespeare Company, and they were looking at doing a series of plays about the Bible. So they sort of spent 4 days with us, and we talked about the Bible, and we had lots of amazing experiences to stimulate us. And I came up with an idea of a young girl who was illiterate learning to read and write using the Bible. So I had this idea in my head, and sort of all the different ideas came together, and it was just waiting to be able to do it. And because the theatre project was postponed or delayed or cancelled, I had this idea, and then I suddenly realised I could write it as a novel. And that was it.
Mary is a fabulous character. Did you think of her like she is right now?
Yeah, it's really difficult to explain as well where a character comes from. For me, each writer approaches it differently, and I know some people think through some of the things in quite a self-conscious way. You know, is it that kind of person? Is it this? Or they'll take someone they know and sort of change them slightly. For me, all I have to do is start writing. And if I write dialogue, and in a way The Colour of Milk is a long piece of dialogue, isn't it? Because it's Mary's voice all the way through. So as soon as I started writing her voice, I mean literally in that first line, I had her there in my head, very alive. And when I write a play, that can sometimes happen. You just write one line of dialogue and you immediately have a character. I could never do it through description. It has to be through someone's voice talking.
Almost all the character of your novel has no trace of compassion. Only the older ones. There's no compassion in poverty?
It's hard, isn't it? I mean, there's a table of needs in life, and I think, you know, it's Maslow's tables of need. And if you are hungry, hunger will come above anything, will come above kindness. If you're cold, needing shelter will come above it. And really, the life that they were leading in that house, there was no room for niceties. There was no room for compassion, really, because the important thing was to get out there, to grow the food, to milk the cow, to make the cheese, because that's what you live off. You know, we're not talking about the luxuries of modern life where, you know, we might go and make a homemade cake or something. If they didn't have that, they would have starved. And I think it makes people very different. I think compassion, there is compassion, of course, in human beings, but I think we've become kinder as those basic requirements have been met.
So modern times are kinder?
Well, in some ways. Yes, I think they are, actually, to be honest, overall. It doesn't seem it sometimes, but to be honest, no, I really do think modern times, yeah, we are much kinder, yeah.
Many times victims are made feel guilty for what they did to them. Do you think that literacy can make them free?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what literacy does for Mary is it allows her to represent herself, and it allows her to make a statement about what happened to her. It doesn't make her free, as you know, if you've read the book, but it does give her some rights, and it gives her the ability to, I kept thinking it was like a witness statement when I was writing it, or it felt like when Mary was writing it, but I was obviously writing it. But yeah, it felt like a witness statement that this is her one chance to tell the truth of what happened. This is what happened, you know, no ambiguity, this is what happened. She sees it so clearly, doesn't she, what happens to her?
What is the borderline between the fear they feel and the dignity that make Mary react? Yeah,
where does her dignity come from? I mean, the sort of amazing thing about human beings is that you do get people like Mary who are born into that kind of thing, and they have this extraordinary strength of character, this strength of will, and where that comes from, and why didn't she feel fear? I mean, I think she did in the moment when these things were happening. There was some fear, but it would never stop her being true to herself. I think that's it. I think because she's always true to herself, even if she feels fear, she can't be anything other than herself. And that's that sort of force of will that she has as a character.
Do you think that there is people who is born with an unstoppable desire of reading?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. You see it in children, don't you? I mean, you know, we're sat in the most beautiful library in Madrid, and if you go into any library and you'll see a child in a children's library, which is why children's reading is so vital, and there'll be some children who are unstoppable. And I know when I was a child, I'm sure many people feel the same, I would read anything. And now if I have nothing to read, I go into a state of panic. I need to be reading, and now need to be writing as well, but need to be reading. And I remember sort of, you know, literally reading the cereal packet on the table, you know, when you're having breakfast. I would have to find something to read, or get two newspapers. When I was about 10, I would get two newspapers and compare them to each other, how they're written differently and how the language is different. So I think you get people who are really compulsive readers. You know, and still with technology, they're still doing it. They're reading and reading and reading all the time.
So when did you decide that you wanted to be writing?
Oh, with hindsight, I can see that it was there from when I was very young. I mean, you know, I've just said about comparing language, but it actually took me a long time to come to it, and I'm not sure why. Of course, that's what I am. It's very clear to me, but there was a long period before. But I think that's a good thing, because I think if you start writing at 20, you end up writing books about people writing books, because you haven't actually had that much life experience. So for me, I have no problem, because I've had a lot of life experience and been immersed in lots of different groups of people who aren't just writers. I think if you just sort of grow up with that one tiny world, you write very differently. So I quite like the fact I came a bit late to it.
This is a novel, as you said, that could be really a play. You write very direct style. Can you tell us, how do you do this?
Yeah, I think that's still developing, actually. I think that's something that I'm finding more and more. I mean, each writer has a writer's voice, and I think sometimes you fight against your own voice as a writer. And I think my voice was incredibly direct and simple, actually. And I thought it needed to be more complicated, but I think sort of having faith in just that simplicity and directness. I think the next book that I've written, which I've just finished, is also very direct, a different voice, a different kind of character, but very strong character, and very direct again. And I think it's not something you choose. I think people think writers have choices, but actually if you're true to yourself and true to your real writer's voice, you don't have that much choice. It's just the way it comes out, and you sort of have to honour how it is that you write rather than fight against it. Does that make sense? So, yeah, and you spend your life discovering what it is that you do and how you do it.
What is the next work we're going to see published in Spain?
So I have just completed this book called Memoirs of a Dipper, which is just being copy edited at the moment. So we're doing the last of the commas, checking all the last tiny details. And that is a memoir of a man who grows up to be a ladrón, a thief. So that's been interesting. That's been really good fun, imagining going into people's houses and stealing their things. I've really enjoyed that, actually, living a vicarious life. So that comes out in England with Penguin in July, so hopefully that will be translated. And I'm writing 2 plays and 2 more novels at the same time, so my head is spinning. Yeah, I've just got lots of different things. I've just stopped all my teaching so that I can do more writing. So now my brain is going, oh, well, you could do this and you could do this. So yeah, lots of projects.
Thank you very much, Nell. It has been a real pleasure for us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks.